Ada Calvo with pure intention, family men with true
Papa Day, as we begin this very first episode, it feels only right that we start with a moment of reflection. Today is Memorial Day. And before we talk about politics, campaigns, and the future of Guam, we want to take a moment to honor the men and women who gave their lives in service to our island and our country, especially the countless sons and daughters of Guam who answered that call generation after generation. For our island, Memorial Day is deeply personal. Guam's relationship with America has always been tied to sacrifice, resilience, and service. From World War I, World War II, the liberation of Guam, to Korea, Vietnam, Persian Gulf, Iraq, Afghanistan, and conflicts across the world, Guameans have consistently stepped forward to serve at some of the highest rates in the nation.
For such a small island, we have given so much. Behind every memorial is a family that carried loss long after the war ended. Parents who never saw their child come home. Husbands, wives, brothers, sisters, and friends whose lives were forever changed by service and sacrifice. And that's why Memorial Day matters. Not because it's a long weekend, not because it's a holiday on the calendar, but because freedom has always come at a cost. And generations of Americans, including many from Guam, paid that price for all of us.
As we record this first podcast episode today, we do so with gratitude for those who came before us and with recognition that the freedoms we enjoy, the ability to speak openly, debate ideas, and discuss plans that will shape the future of our island, were protected by people willing to give everything in defense of this nation. So before anything else, we remember them. To all fallen heroes of Guam and across our country, thank you. We honor you, we remember you, and we will never forget your sacrifice. And with that, we welcome you to our very first podcast episode of the AC Exchange. This podcast is about conversations, real conversations about the future of Guam, the challenges we face, and the opportunities ahead. Throughout this campaign, there's going to be a lot said from a lot of different places. But here, we want to speak directly to the people of Guam. And that's what really the exchange means. An open exchange of ideas, perspectives, and honest discussion about Guam, where Guam is today, and where we want the island, and where we want to go as an island.
Our campaign slogan is simple: put Guam first. And to us, that means putting the needs of our people ahead of politics. It means focusing on families, affordability, public safety, housing, economic opportunity, and making sure government is working for the people, not the other way around. We want this to be a space where we can talk openly and honestly about the issues affecting our families, our businesses, our veterans, our Manomku, and the next generation that will inherit this island long after this election is over.
So now let's get into it. I'm Tony Ada, and with me is my running mate, EJ Calvo.
Alpha Day.
And this is the AC Exchange. You know, EJ, this podcast, I've done this before in the past with Felix. It was on the trail with Felix and Tony back in 2022. And this was actually a great forum to go out and talk more about what our ideas are, what our plans are. And we had as much time as we wanted. You know, forums and debates and media, all that, your time, you can only, you got 20 seconds to respond. You got 2 minutes to respond.
You mean it wasn't AI generated?
No, it wasn't AI generated. So, it gave us that opportunity to say, hey, you know what? Let's go on there. Let's talk about what the issues are that face our island. How are we going to address these issues? And we took as much time as we needed. We can discuss whatever topics we wanted to discuss and the topics that were important to our people. And, that is what is important. And, it's moving from how we get the information out to how we really let the people know what our platform is as well. And
I'm excited. Let's get started.
Let's get started. So I'm Tony Ada, and I am the current Vice Speaker of the 38th Guam Legislature. I am also the Chairman for the Housing, Land, Agriculture, Infrastructure, Parks and Recreation. And, it's just been a really a whirlwind this past 20 months. What is it now? No, about 16, 17 months.
Yeah.
That we've been in the 38th Guam legislature. Prior to that, I served from the 30 to the 33rd, and then again in the 36th Guam legislatures. I was the minority previously, minority leader in 2 terms, and now I'm also a veteran of the United States Army. I served 6 years, stationed in many different places. I was stationed in Fort Campbell. I was stationed in Germany, in Mannheim. And then my last duty station prior to coming back home was Fort Drum, New York. Stayed there for a little bit.
Yeah.
Came home, went back into the family business. And, this past year, we celebrate 54 years of business here on our island.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's what my parents started out as a small family-owned business is now in its 3rd generation. And, just like you, right? You come from a background of family entrepreneurs.
Yep.
I'm married to my beautiful wife, Annette. We celebrated 40 years last year.
Yep. Congrats.
And we have 4 wonderful children. Leilani, Vince, who we call Boo, Ali, and Amaya. We just got home, as you know.
Absolutely.
Last week from LA, where Amaya graduated at LMU, where V
My daughter also graduated, yes.
At LMU. And I had a really good experience and background in with how Annette has really supported me all these years in being in public service. Right, it was actually a very difficult transition because when Felix first asked me to be a director of Department of Youth Affairs, he said, "Hey, come on, I need you to be the director for DYA," and I was like, I'll think about it." And he goes, "Sure, you can think about it." And this was on a Wednesday. So I went back Friday to the office and I was going to give him my answer. And I said, "Well, sir, he goes, well, welcome to the family. And you start Monday." And I was like, "What? It's Monday? I wasn't coming back here to tell you that I was going to do it." But that was actually my very first experience in government. And it was really a good experience in looking how government operates. How is it that we want to change what is going on within our government and the services that we provide to our people? And, people have asked me, why do you want to run for governor? Do you see what's going on? Do you see the difficulties that our island is facing at this time? And I said, no, absolutely, I do. But I think this is the best time to run for governor is when we're facing difficulties, when we're facing challenges, because we want to come together and we can show the resilience of our people on our island and show that, we're not asking for handouts. We just want that opportunity to build our people on our island. And that's what we're going to do as the Ada Calvo administration.
And Tony, outside of course, serving as senator, you were tapped on twice to also run for lieutenant governor.
Yeah. I was tapped on with Ray Tenorio, and then from there with Felix Camacho. And, it was really an honor and a privilege to actually be asked to run for lieutenant governor. And that's why, in that same token, I turned around and I tapped you to run for lieutenant governor because I saw the passion and the drive that you had in trying and helping build our economy in a different way. And that way was the things that you brought to our island, not just the comedies and the different concerts and things like that, but you brought a team, a national basketball team, to do what it is that shows and highlights what our people are made of here. And you had so many, accolades around the island and in different areas within the Asian South Pacific games and things like that you've done, right? I mean,
yeah. Did it take a lot for you to think outside of a normal, politician that was, I guess, more considered a natural fit for lieutenant governor?
Well, it's I think just being different because you brought an experience that is really different, and that's being you knew government, but you were not a politician. You served as the chairman and as a member of the Guam Economic Development Authority for many years.
Yep.
And then you had a different perspective there. in a different light. You had tourism. You brought people to the island that brought laughter and joy, right?
Yep.
And then the network of folks that you had being out in Asia, and what is it that you're networking? I mean, is it important to be that you know so much about government? Sure. But I think when you know more about lives in a different perspective than government, then you bring a different, how would I say it? You bring a different void that's being filled, right? And that's what we need today. Because we can talk about how great it is to be a part of the government of Guam for many years and that nature, but what we're not seeing is how is it that we're connected in a different way, and that's bringing different industries or different what they call it. There's just so many things
Different
that
opportunities,
opportunities, right?
Yeah.
And how we can make Guam better, and it's putting Guam first, and that's putting our island first as well.
I think it's just incredible that it's the timing has been about a year from today that this journey has begun for me anyway. I know you were already a front runner to run for governor, represent the Republican Party months before, but I got the call in about in May of 2025 to consider potentially maybe running for office and becoming a partner in this team, and of course I wanted to do as much contemplating and discuss with everyone that I respect and want to get their guidance, because it's a major life decision, and as that process went on, we sat down and had a few frank conversations just like this one, and about what we think about the future of Guam and how we can work together and not only run a campaign, but eventually manage the government and make some changes that for the benefit of our community. So it started a year ago, and by the time we made it official, a few months later, I think that's now 8 months ago.
Yeah.
So much has happened. We've touched so many people in terms of communicating our vision and feeling their inspiration back to us, and we've been fueled by the energy out there, and I'll never regret this decision, regardless what happens, because it's been a great experience just from last May until this May, and I feel like there's still so much more to come.
Oh, definitely. And I think that even with our families, Annette and Jackie, our kids, they've grown and learned so much about each other over these past several months that, we become like just one big family. And, it's really interesting to see how, when we first started out, here we are, Annette and I, hey, you guys go this way, we'll go that way. And now here we are today. And it's like, okay, we'll be there with you guys. We go together. And it just goes to show that even with me, EJ, when I first started in politics, man, I was shy. I didn't want to, I was like kind of like reserved, right? But now it's just one of those things that you and Jackie, kind of reserve at the onset. But now, it's just people are getting to know who Tony and Annette and EJ and Jackie as a team are. And it's just something that we just continue to develop. Well,
like everyone, I think we've always enjoyed our privacy. At the same time, we've been active with a lot of and an active participant in a lot of community activities.
Right.
In our children's school, of course. So we're both athletes and both represented Guam on the national stage, and we've both been involved with businesses and organizations, but still like to maintain somewhat some of our anonymity. So this was a big change, but nothing that we felt we couldn't overcome. Obviously, to talk about my background, I primarily saw myself always as a businessman. That was my dream, to follow in my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my father, my uncles, their footsteps, and build things and manage and be a problem solver and grow enterprise and also feel, the big thing about being an entrepreneur, it's all about solving problems.
Right.
Finding a solution to a problem that people want and offering that, and that's what leads to success in any business. So that's always been my dream. And as I was continuing on that path, I started picking up other opportunities. I guess I got tapped on by Governor Camacho to sit on the Economic Development Board. I think they said I was one of the youngest board members they've ever had at the time.
Right.
And I learned so much, but I also look back at those early years very fondly because Guam was growing. In the early 2000s, there was a lot of growth during that time. Tourism started to pick up again, and we really worked with the programs at GITA, and I saw it firsthand how the government can not only incentivize but really support investment and support development of the economy in different ways. The agricultural industry, of course, the tourism industry. I remember one of the things when I sat on the board in the very early days, it might have been one of our first few board meetings. The old Palace Hotel was falling apart, and we really wanted to see that hotel reopened. And so we put out a QC to incentivize the reinvestment into that hotel. And I think, just fast forward a few years later, and we're walking around the Sheraton, and you see all the employees, gainfully employed, working. I think we had several events that we promoted and produced there, and how many weddings, and that was all going to stop. And because of something that we did to work with a private sector investor, the ripple effect is amazing. And so I said, how do we do this more and create more job opportunities, more career opportunities for people? And that was very early on. And then total, I was on the GITA board for 10 years, but the last 4 I got elected or pushed as the chairman of the board,
Right.
where now I'm put in a position of leadership with board members that I highly respect, or much more seasoned than I am in business, and they're looking at me to kind of pull it together. And I enjoyed that challenge.
And that's the time during the museum.
And that was during the
right?
Calvo administration now. And
Looking at building the museum.
we did the hot bond projects. We built the museum. We built the farmers co-op. We did the Inaran Community Center revitalization.
The Plaza de España.
Plaza de España revitalization. This was an exciting time. Tourism was now really at its peak. We were looking at that 2 million arrival number, and there was opportunity. And that is what I really enjoyed during my role at GITA and during those times. And I think we can get back there. At the same time, I switched hats from being a national athlete to becoming the coach. I was voluntold that I need to come in and now coach the team and win a gold medal in the Pacific Games, which was always a dream of mine. And then finally in 2015, after we won the gold medal, they said, okay, do it again. And so I said, okay, I'll just keep going. 15 years later, we finally elevated the program. We developed an old government facility in Tijan to become the national gym. We set up youth training programs. It just really grew. And it was never a long-term plan.
Right.
But you just keep going. Just going year after year saying, what else can we do to just take that next step for whatever organization I'm a part of? And you got to know how to work with people. You can't do it yourself. Yeah. And so that's where I think people started to think of me as a leader. Of course, I eventually became the president for the National Basketball Federation. It was really prematurely. One of my best friends, Mr. Tony Thompson, who is my coach, one of my mentors, passed away in 2018, and I wasn't ready at the time. I didn't think I was, and the board looked at me and said, "No, you need to become the next president," because we knew that was going to come someday. We didn't think it'd be this soon, and so I just stepped into the role, and I said, "Okay, now let's get to work." And that's just the attitude I've always had.
Yeah.
If there's a need, I'm ready to step in. I'm ready to work. It's obviously something that I've grown up around, and a mindset that's led to success in many ways. And I'll just say from the get go, when we sat down and started talking about running a campaign together, eventually sitting in Adelup and being given the responsibility to turn things around and bring Guam to new heights, I got the vibe that now, this is different. This is something that I feel there's a calling for. I saw the look in your eye. I saw, you talked about work ethic. You talked about, and it wasn't work ethic months from now. It's like we get started immediately
Right.
as soon as you agree.
That's right.
And I think the day we agreed, you said, okay, let's get started.
Let's get started.
And that's been the momentum. And I like that. I like the mindset of, what I always say is, chop wood, carry water. It's the basic things, getting up every day and just doing work. And there's going to be those, I know there's visionary ideas, there's long-term ideas, but there's also low-lying fruit that just needs to get done in our government and for our community.
Yeah.
That as someone growing up in Guam, I know I share a lot of the frustration recently when it comes to things that really are fundamental, things that are really basic. And I'm really excited that we would have the opportunity to address those issues. And I'm sure we can get into what some of those issues are. But to me, it's something that should have been done yesterday. And hopefully if people are out there listening, it gets done tomorrow.
Right.
There's no reason why we need to wait till we take office. We just want to see things work in the favor of the island and things that are really expected of the leaders.
Yeah, I mean, there's no patent to help cleaning up the island and things of that nature, right? I mean, both you and I, we've given so much of our time, our personal resources, so much time of our families, outside of government, and that's who Tony and EJ is, right? We do so much personally, and we can do much more as government leaders. And I think that's the side that people would love to see about us, right? They're getting to know us, who we are as Tony and EJ. They're getting to know us and our families. They're getting to know what we bring to the table, and then they're going to see what we actually do to execute what we want to do as government leaders. These past several months, we've had many cleanups, and that doesn't. It's because we want to do things for our island and not wait till we get, like you said, why wait until we get in? Let's start doing it out and
Take
let's
action.
start doing it now. And, today as we opened up our podcast, we were mentioning about Memorial Day. And, our team, the Ada and EJ Calvo team, our volunteers, we reached out to the Guam Veterans Affairs office to take care of the cemetery in East Agana, the Navy Cemetery. And, it's unfortunate because, they told us, no, they already have volunteers for that. And so Colonel George, came back and said, well, we're going to have to do another project because they said they already have volunteers that's taking care of that. And,
The headstones.
Yeah. You remember, we wanted to paint the headstones. We wanted to cut the grass, clean it up, and get it ready for Memorial Day.
Yes.
Well, unfortunately, I passed there this morning.
Still not done.
And the photos show a whole different story. Not a single headstone was painted. They had trash still in the cemetery, and it was just really unbecoming of trying to memorialize and give recognition to those who passed and are buried there.
That's really unfortunate.
And the reason why we wanted to make that a part of our cleanup is because my grandfather's buried there.
Wow.
My mother's father. And it was more of a personal thing that we wanted to do for the cemetery.
Wow.
So this morning I put on our family chat and I said, my nephew Sean, and I asked him, can you go get some paint and paint Pop's headstone, and if you can get a flag, put a flag there for him, because He's a World War II veteran, and he's also a Guam Insular Guard, and there was nothing there to recognize for his service. So it was unfortunate, and we're gonna reach out again, and hopefully we'll be able to get our team to get there and do what is right and get that cemetery cleaned up.
I've really enjoyed those cleanups, and I hope we get the chance to also contribute to the cemetery, and like we were hoping to. But it's, how many have we done now?
Six cleanups.
Yeah. And what's crazy is you do one or two, and although an area of the island gets clean, we end up with pickup load of trash bags like a mountain high.
Yeah.
But after you get consistent like we've been, I drive around seeing a difference. It actually makes a difference if just one organization like our team that we formed to come together for this campaign just gets busy, and it's just once a month getting out there at sunrise and before it gets too hot and getting some work done. And it's so rewarding. And I've done cleanups before, but far and few between. If we had more groups taking up this hobby, and coordinating, maybe through the government's office, the LT's office, and
well, that's the LT's, one of the mandates of the lieutenant governor.
Absolutely.
Is island beautification.
And just work together and say, we're going to take care of this park. We can work in partnership with the government and make such a big difference. Because we have seen it firsthand. We've been doing it. I'll admit, I enjoy painting the graffiti and kind of hiking and picking up trash more than standing and waving.
Yeah. But and you take that, right, EJ? You take that, painting that graffiti at that wall.
Yeah.
Imagine that was that Saturday that you and the team were to be down at the cemetery.
Could have done that.
Painting the headstones and making it presentable, because Typhoon Sinlaco just finished coming through the island and cleaning up the cemetery and getting it ready for Memorial Day. It would have been so meaningful, and that's why I told Colonel George, I said, please, if we can, let's I want this to be our mission for May, right?
Let's get it done, and let's keep it going.
Absolutely. And we could have painted graffiti in a different day, but we should have actually got this ready for Memorial Day. And, the Guam Veteran Cemetery was, it was nice and prepped, but we forgot about those that are buried in the Navy Cemetery in East Agana. And that is very unfortunate. So,
I look forward to doing that in the future.
So, we'll take this and go on to another subject, and putting Guam first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the slogan that we finally adopted for our campaign, it really felt natural to me because of our conversation early on. We, and I think you were interviewing me, I was interviewing you, and we were talking over coffee. And I think I shared this before that one of my first questions, I tried to find out more about what you already had planned, what your platform looks like.
And what did I tell
as the
you?
gubernatorial candidate? And it blew me away because first thing you talked about was accountability and just more of the bringing your style of management and your a culture to government that is responsible, that is transparent, and that made a lot of sense to me because because of a lot of what I've been hearing and seeing. But when it came to the ideas, you looked at me and said, we're going to build this together. This is not going to be my plan or my platform. It's going to be our platform. And I'm going to count on you to help execute and carry out some of these ideas and projects. And I've told people that story. And I said, you don't understand what it took for me to hold my excitement in and, just play it cool, because you're talking my language. I'm ready to get to work, and I have ideas.
Right.
Of course, everything needs due diligence. And one thing I noticed about you, Tony, was the style of management that I also agree with is the most successful is to build the team and bring people to the table. And not everyone agrees, but you've got to have people come together and bring their strengths to the table. Everyone has a role.
That's right.
To play. And now I'm thinking like a coach. The best coach is get the best out of people. and get everyone to understand, how to work together for greater good. And I think that style, regardless of how we move forward with whatever idea, it'll end up in the right place. But yeah, we have ideas. I mean, we're ready to go.
Yeah, definitely. Because when you look at what we bring together, right, we got a lot of strengths, but where our weaknesses are at, we have each other to lean on to, right? Within our team, we have each other to say, okay, well, you know what, I can pick up on that, and we can shift to here. But that's what's so unique about our team, is that we work off of each other and we build each other. We don't try to, have that crap mentality where, one of the teammates is getting and pull them down. We help each other up.
Yeah.
And that is what is so unique about our team.
That's what I learned is probably one of the top qualities of a true leader is that you work to make other people look good.
Exactly.
And I think that's the mistake where some people, especially in politics, hate to say, where it's more about shining the spotlight on them. And I don't think that's the right, naturally you're acknowledged for accomplishing goals, but I'm always about recruiting talent, of course, and motivating them, but also, giving them the opportunity to, star in their role and succeed, because if they succeed, we succeed. And
Exactly.
I think that's the attitude that I got from you. And that also led to me saying, yes, I want to move forward and let's go down this road.
But it's also your experiences, right, EJ, and in Gita, in learning what government was about in that segment, right? And now it's bringing that expertise and expanding it throughout the entire government of Guam.
Yeah.
And a lot of like I said earlier, yes, there's individuals that know so much about government.
Yeah.
But the problem is they lost focus on the other side, and that's the community side, right? And how is it that we can rebuild the community? How is it that we rebuild and help our people? How is it that we put Guam first? And that's putting politics aside and getting to work and getting the people what they need. And how is it we're not looking for handouts? We're just looking to get that hand up so that we'll be able to help our island and our people not just thrive, not just succeed, right? But, to thrive and be here on our island, get our children back here and make their families grow up here on our island.
Yeah, I think there is a feeling that obviously there's frustration and there's a feeling that we're behind in many ways. We're talking about, we could get into the statistics of tourism and employment opportunities. There's a lot of concern out there, and I think yes, we need to fully recover. I think we're still kind of seeing that recovery phase from from COVID to the typhoons we had to overcome. But after that, we should be thinking past that in terms of reaching new heights.
I mean, we've been rolling out our platform, and later on in our future podcasts, we're going to be talking about our platform, right? We've rolled out housing.
It's clear we have a shortage of housing.
Very clear.
And there's a lot of work to be done, and it's gonna be historic work, because if you really look back and like we did and said, okay, so we need to, as an island, accomplish a goal of creating a better inventory of housing availability for people, and that'll help stabilize rates. That is a monumental task. And, you got to shoot high. We have to, do our best to hit that objective, but it's exciting just that we're setting that goal and we're going to aggressively attack it. I think that's 6,000 new homes,
right?
Is the estimate in terms of the shortfall before we can start really seeing the housing market stabilize and rental rates go down and not only go down, but maintain, so they don't continue escalating, because that's what's going to cause people to leave the island.
Yeah. And, we want to make housing attainable, right? There's affordable housing, but then we need housing that's attainable, so
Absolutely.
that families can say, I want to purchase a house, so that becomes now the first most important and biggest expenditure that a family's going to make. And that's what we need to do, is make sure that it's affordable and attainable for them.
Yeah. I know we have other cost of living initiatives that we're going to be talking about.
Right.
We have economic initiatives we're going to be talking about, especially in regards to our biggest economic engine has been tourism. And we can definitely explore all the diversification opportunities that are out there. But man, we need to turn the tourism market around because 2019 pre-pandemic, we were on our way, and unfortunately,
Almost 2 million, right?
yeah, there was the big setback. But although we look at that as okay, we're still recovering. Other nations in the region
Have already recovered.
have already recovered and are beating their numbers, and it's scary because they are really positioning themselves for the future to be the lead in the market that we compete for.
Yeah. I mean, you
So-
always hear, well, it's the exchange rate and things of that nature, but if it was truly the exchange rate, then how is it other markets are gaining tourists from Japan, from Korea, from, Taiwan, but yet we're not picking up on that because they're heading to other markets, right?
Yeah, they're choosing other places, and I think we can't do the same thing that worked for us in the past. There's some things that we learned from during our obviously decades of experience as a tourism industry, as a paradise island, but we have to think outside the box and do things differently as well.
And that's destination improvements, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm excited. We're going to talk a lot more about that
Yeah.
and get down into a little bit of detail. Of course, we need to look into ways to make the island safer. We have some really good ideas, and it's going to take the team coming together and really improving on that. What else are you excited about talking about?
I'm excited about how Typhoon Sinlaku passed us, and we brought out our resilience plan.
Oh, it's needed.
Yeah, and we had some conversations with folks from different industries, but most especially the fuel industry,
Yes.
who has spoken about how they like our idea of actually having silos of fuel storages outside of the Port Authority.
Oh, that'd be huge. I remember someone saying, "You don't understand what would happen if, for some reason, we had a fuel shortage, and cars just were abandoned because they just run out of gas.
Yeah.
Generators would start shutting down.
I mean,
then you
that
lose
was
your
almost
cold.
that was almost a reality years ago when one of the fuel storage down in the port exploded, right?
Yeah. That was Pongsoma.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
that almost became a reality.
Yeah,
And that's why we need to start looking at this resilience of how we move fuel storages outside of the port. And that doesn't mean, you put everything out. You just enough to sustain the island for, whatever it may be. A week,
Just in case.
just in case. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. We've been through so many natural disasters. We should be experts, and we should have an answer for every potential problem. And the more I talk to people, and unfortunately, you could assume, oh, that's been thought of. Like, no, you'd be in trouble. Our island would be in trouble, and we'd be in trouble if we suffered, unfortunately, one of these potential disasters. So I think we need to harden the island, and we'll be ready to prepare us for anything.
Yeah, and we also spoke about the hard work that the men and women of the Guam Power Authority and Guam Water Works have done during the recovery, right? But how is it that we pre-plan now? What do we do to ensure that there's generators at the different water pumps, that we try to harden the infrastructure of the utilities of power, getting power underground and working with the federal government. And we rolled that out in our resilience plan. And that's more, that's what this podcast is about, where we can talk more about those
Yeah.
issues and other issues that are pressing to our people.
And you put forward already a bill to set up a disaster relief fund.
Exactly. And that, we want to make sure that, it becomes like the rainy day fund, but separate and aside from that, where, we don't have to do this appropriation before, a typhoon strikes. It's already been, set aside over the
It's
years.
financially responsible, ready for the next disaster to take place.
Yeah. And then we just replenish it by whatever reimbursements we get from FEMA or the appropriations annually that we place into it. But at least it's something that we can build upon year after year versus waiting until a disaster happens and then taking appropriations from different agencies away because we didn't prior plan.
Yeah.
In the Army they say the 5 P's, right? Prior planning prevents and piss poor performance. So that's what we got to do is we just
Okay.
got to prior plan. Yeah.
That's great. I think if anyone is interested in checking out the Guam First Agenda, which is the framework of our platform, it's on adacalvo.com online. We'll be uploading more of the detailed information. The initiatives will be rolled out one at a time and given its chance for people to talk about. We try to always engage with the media in case there's more questions, and
Right.
that's been good. We had to put a little pause during the last storm and recovery phase of the storm, but I think we're going to get back on track with our platform rollout.
Oh, definitely. And the past week has really been exciting because we celebrated your birthday.
We did. Yeah, that was very unique. It was very fun, but just very unique because I never thought I'd have a birthday like that. Hundreds of people celebrating my birthday, and I'm glad they came in support of our campaign, but also to have a good time with me that night. So that was just a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
was
So
fun.
with that, we're gonna go ahead and go on and take it back to our producers and see what they got lined up for us. But again, EJ, what was that? Adacalvo.com?
Adacalvo.com. We're going to keep uploading information on our website. Follow us on social media as well because our team is very active, and we just want to put as much information out from our campaign as possible. But at the same time, we're going to have fun. We're going to show all the energy of this campaign and just make sure that all our supporters kind of see the momentum grow. And that's what we've been doing since last October, right?
Yeah.
Since we had our first big rollout.
And they can also donate on our
Website,
right?
yeah, we need support. Helps us get the message out, helps us continue operating our campaign.
Yeah, definitely. And to all our volunteers, to our supporters, to all those that help our campaign, we wouldn't be here today without all of them.
Absolutely.
And we truly appreciate all the hard work that they put into our campaign. And this is just not our campaign. This is their campaign. And this is the campaign to put Guam first. And, we just continue to roll in that manner. And, we really appreciate all the hard work that they put out there for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to our producers,
What's up next?
What do we got next?
Very good discussions, very good conversations between you two. This segment we're going to be calling the rapid round.
Oh, rapid round.
I'm going to be throwing out some statements, and you guys give us your thoughts in 60 seconds. Okay. Number one, first one. Too many young people feel like they have to leave Guam to succeed.
I agree. It's true. I think I don't want to downplay leaving the island because I think that's a great thing to go out and explore the world, whether it's for your educational career or maybe even some work experience outside of the island. But the big thing is about wanting to come back and continue your career here and or raise a family or both.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's most important is regardless of whether they want to leave the island, is that they're attracted to come back for all the great things that Guam has to offer.
I agree as well. And, we had this point in time where so many folks had left the island because a job opportunity was offered to them out in Colorado. And what we want to do is turn around now and bring all those folks right back here to fill different positions and different jobs that are currently available on our island. We need that expertise. We need that experience for them to come back.
And those are good. That's a good situation where they go out and get experience
And then come back.
bring it back. I think the scary thing is if they're leaving for a reason where Guam just doesn't seem like a place they'd like to raise their family or expand their career. And that will hurt our island if we continue to lose talent.
Yeah, definitely.
And they don't want to come back because there's not much going on. We
Yeah.
need to change that,
And we will.
and we will.
The Ada Calvo team will.
Government moves too slowly to solve real problems.
I agree.
I agree as well.
Yeah, government these past several years have actually moved quite slow. There's many opportunities that they could have done. I mean, simple things, right? The low hanging fruits, the guardrails on the side of the road, the marking, the stripings on the highway so that people can have better visibility, the potholes, the painting of different government facilities. All those things were low hanging fruits that could have been done, that should have been done, but weren't done. So,
Years sometimes go by.
oh,
And you
definitely.
see the same
I mean, look at the
problem.
hospital, right? It's been many years that the hospital was getting a little bit of a paint job, and now they're finally doing it. And sometimes you have to wonder, the timing of things, right?
And we don't need to get into it, but the issuance of grants
Yeah.
that are provided to benefit the people, and those need to go out quicker because people are waiting and they need it.
Yeah, definitely.
Housing is, and you guys touched on this on your podcast, but one of them is housing is the issue that will define Guam's future.
I totally agree. And it's one of those that is the biggest investment in a family's with a decision, right?
Yeah.
Is to buy a house.
Yeah.
Because usually once you buy a house, that's where you plan to live the rest of your life. And if we don't do what we can to start improving the availability or the way to finance a home, or the way to get people onto properties, especially like Chamorro Land Trust properties, right? We need to start getting those issued to folks. But before we give them to people, we need to make sure that they got the infrastructure, the water, the power, so that when they get there, all they need to do is find out how they're going to finance their home and build their home.
Yeah, I think the availability of housing is crucial, but I think it's a sensitive balance with job opportunity at the same time, and cost of your groceries, cost of your utilities, and all of that put together kind of, I think, balances the decisions of families in the future of whether to raise their family in Guam, whether they're really prospering on the island, or moving elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I think it's very key.
People are tired of hearing promises without results.
Oh, absolutely. I think, sorry, coming from a non-political background, I think really people want to see politicians just be honest. And if something is not going to happen, then say so. And if there's a commitment to get something done, then do it. I understand, as many people do, that there's obstacles sometimes. There's speed bumps that slow things down, but we need leadership that can find a way or pivot and work with people to find a solution instead of just pointing the finger and saying,
There's
"Oh, it's
nothing can
their
be done."
fault. Nothing can be done," and that's those empty promises are just something that frustrate a lot of people. Sorry to say.
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct.
Guam needs less politics and more execution.
And that's kind of like the earlier question, right? And kind of like those low hanging fruits, right? A lot of execution. There's absolutely no excuse why we couldn't, we couldn't do things these past many years, because we had over $2 billion in federal funding that came our way. I mean, just millions and millions and millions of dollars that it could have done a lot of work. And in the past couple of years, what's happened? We've returned millions of dollars
Oh, my
back to the
gosh.
federal government. So these are the things that we, as the lieutenant governor, is in charge of the state clearinghouse. You got to make sure that when these grants that are applied for come in, that they're executed to its full potential.
They go where they need to go, and
Exactly.
to benefit the island. I mean, there's just a lot. When you say the word execution, and it's understood. If there's not a financing problem or a funding problem, it's an execution problem, and we need problem solvers to really push things forward. I mean, we should have a swimming pool in Hagatnya for many reasons. There should actually be multiple facilities that should have been developed that weren't developed in the last few years.
Yeah.
And I think that all comes down to execution. just someone driving it forward and making it their their obsession to get it done. That's their job, really.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at what's been going on with the public-private partnerships, right? Especially with soccer. We got, now we're going to have fields built down in Hagåtña. We got a couple of fields opening down in Agate. Tino, right? St. Gil, he's really been instrumental in, getting funding from the association and bringing it to Guam to where we can open up these facilities. And
great.
I think it's very important because, Gov Guam is not using any of its funding. We just have to find them and provide them the space where they can build these facilities, but yet it's going to be utilized for the community. And those are the type of things that we need to continue to look at. It's if people are willing to build it, why not? Let's
we
work
need
with
to
them.
create better partnerships and get it done, because it seemed to be also, I'm hearing a lot about how slow things have moved.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it's low-lying fruit. We should be creating ways to find the solution instead of make excuses why things are taking so long. So really appreciate the opportunity to see these organizations come in with either funding or expertise. And I've met a lot of them, and I think a lot of them are hopeful that with the new administration, things will change and they'll be able to see things happen. And we'll talk more about those
Definitely.
those groups in the future.
Yeah. So, we're coming to a close to our first podcast, more of an introduction of Tony and EJ, right? And we're looking forward for our next podcast and rolling out more of our platform, rolling out more of our ideas, and, getting questions from folks. And hopefully we can answer them on our future podcast episodes. So with that, we'll take this podcast to a close. Oh, I'm sorry. and here I was so excited,
Yeah. No, let's just keep going.
Yeah, okay, go for it. Yeah.
So, one of the biggest reasons I made the decision to run with Tony is because I believe Guam needs leadership that's focused on getting things done and putting people first again. This campaign is about families trying to afford a home, young people wondering if they can build a future here, and residents who feel like government hasn't been listening. Tony and I believe Guam can do better. But more importantly, we believe we have to start having honest conversations about the challenges facing this island and the work it's going to take to move Guam forward. That's why we're here, and that's why we started this podcast. So thank you for spending time with us. And Tony, I'll turn it back to you to close us out.
Thank you, EJ. And to everyone listening, the reason I'm running for governor is simple. I believe Guam cannot afford more of the same. Too many families are struggling. Too many young people feel uncertain about their future here. And too many important problems have been allowed to sit without real solutions. I'm running because I believe Guam deserves leadership that is focused on results, accountability, and putting our people first again. The island has given so much to all of us. Now it's time for government to do its part and deliver to the people of Guam. Thank you for joining us on this first episode of the AC Exchange with Tony and EJ. We'll see you next time.
Ada Calvo.